if something is wrong, there is a problem, and most of the time it is the ethical codex which has been hurt or which has been influenced. So that's why I think the code of conduct in science is becoming more and more important, and the title is well chosen, well thought, well planned from Osreen and Graziella, and I think we need to at some point talk about this, how important is the ethical side in science. And it's always a question when you start your career, and we had this very nice discussion, how much, this question itself, how much wrong is allowed, I mean how much plagiarism is acceptable, creates an ethical doubt. Alright, so it's nothing for a person, but it is a natural question. How much, I mean, even small kids at home, they check when they are growing up the limit of the parents, till what time they can go and how much can they irritate before the explosion occurs. So that's like going to the borders is very human, but the point is, certain things in a behavioral science you can make things also reversible, but in the real world of science, if you do wrong, it is irreversible. It's an irreversible damage to the community. It is an irreversible damage to your own personality, whoever is doing whatever wrong conduct. These misconduct is forever, because you cannot erase. A journal has only the power of withdrawing the papers, striking you off their list as an author, as a reviewer, but still people can find everything in the web and so on. So, and ignorance is not protecting. If you say, I don't know, I was not aware, because somebody, if the supervisor is asking you to do the right thing, still you are responsible if you executed it. It doesn't matter who has the major share. So this is also important to know where the boundaries are, where things can go wrong. So based on this, it's more like an interactive discussion. I don't want to give a frontal lecture like having, as you were saying, don't shoot down your PowerPoint slides. So I want to go through certain points and also have your opinion on them. The first thing is ethics and science. They are obviously two wheels of the same carriage, and I will show you. Responsible conduct, the moment you, and that's a difference between a job and a profession. If you say I am a scientist by profession, you are guided by a professional codex, and this is universal. It doesn't matter whether you are doing science in India or China or somewhere in Timbuktu, it's the same. The scientific roles and responsibilities, because whether you are reviewing a paper, a degree of fairness that you expect that people treat you with, you have to also reciprocate. And if there is an ethical misconduct, how will you judge it that there is a misconduct? You have to be aware of it. So that awareness, that's a responsibility of oneself. So you have to educate yourself. And if there are pitfalls, I will show you one or two examples that these pitfalls can happen at any level of your career. And then plagiarism and self-involvement and correctiveness or correctives. Because as I said, that sometimes mistakes may happen without you even know that there was a mistake done by you or something is wrong on your part. But if you are part of that, you have to understand the implications. Then the ethical dimensions and your personal convictions. They are your own personality plays a big role, because the appetite of becoming successful fast is different in different person. So the professional pressure, the peer pressure, this drive that you need to excel is different in different people. So I think this is where one has to also openly discuss how much is allowed, and I think this is and it depends on the context. I just want to start with this example that time has changed the meanings of ethics. This is a famous example, and I think most of those who know Boyle, the gas law, he was a natural scientist, and in the earlier days, scientists used to show the examples that when they had figured out something new, they will demonstrate it and then discuss it. So he is demonstrating in this example happens if you take a glass jar and slowly evacuate it. And this is the famous experiment, bird in the air pump. So the bird is here and you are now sucking out the air. So through this exsuction, the same thing will happen. It will not, the bird will not be able to breathe. And this is the observation. Everybody is looking and they're realizing that vacuum kills, because obviously your metabolism will stop. So this very nicely says the bird for a while appear lively enough, but upon a greater exsuction of the air, she began manifestly to droop and appear sick, and very soon after was taken with as violent and irregular convulsion as I want to be observed in poultry when you are killing a chicken. And so when the heads are wrung off, for the bird threw herself over and over 2 or 3 times and died with her breast upward, her head downwards, and her neck awry. So maybe for an editor, this is a well-written abstract. The point is now, everything is there. It is, and that time it was allowed because this was completely new. Now today, with every country having an ethical guideline on how to deal with, so if we work a lot on use of nanoparticle for theranostic application, you wait for years to get permission in Germany before the mice test can be done. So there is an ethics commission. Your science can be excellent, but the ethics commission, if they don't see the need, they will not allow it. So that is also important. An experiment like this today, this will not, you won't get any limelight, you will even run into problems. Second thing is that when we talk about that it is, I mentioned that it's a success and responsible conduct, two faces of the same coin. It's more like a Janus headed, this Roman god with 2 heads, that it is a problem which is very intimately connected to each other. Now on one side you obviously have, these are the typical reasons where things can go wrong. Conflict of interest, like if you have a good friend and you get his or her paper and you are reviewing it very lightly, not going into the details and not being serious enough. Conflict of interest. You are reading a proposal which is related to your idea, you are taking some ideas, executing before these people can do the work. All these things can happen. False information, making up the data. Who cares whether it's 63% yield or 75? If it is 75 is good. So these things, and then we discussed when you can copy, and data fabrication, redundant publication. That's the biggest problem nowadays. You can take, and somehow this is in the community, that if you have written a manuscript, you will find somewhere a journal willing to publish it, because this desire of capturing the content is so high, and there are a lot of predatory journals. We have maybe 4 or 5 serious publishing houses, but maybe 50, and I will give you one example how dangerous they are. Duplicate publications, this you can do that in a way that everyone notices, but you can also do in a subtle way that no one notices, but it exists. And then authors dispute, which can also lead a ethical conduct, that if you are not part of the work, if you have no intellectual contribution, you have not really performed, and you are just there because people like you, you are a nice guy in the group, taking care of the social atmosphere, but not really doing too much. So maybe out of sympathy, if you go and get, then you should be smart enough, or that should be your self-esteem to say, no, I think you should put me in acknowledgement, but not in the list of the co-authors, because you never know when this thing can misfire. You are called for an interview and you don't understand what the science is. So even those things are very important, but this is a self-judgment, self-control. Now the second thing is that I just mentioned that scientific, these are the drivers, and your scientific progress, professional standing, citation, we all need citation, peer pressure, recognition. If you want to be recognized in the field. If I am doing a work for last 20 years, I want that people read my paper, they invite me to conferences, and so these are the drivers why people may sometimes lose the path. Competitive field, if I don't over project, I may not get funding. I have to convince the reviewers. I need more publications because I have a review due, my tenure depends on that, my salary depends on that. Collaborations. If I have collaboration, then I really want to show I'm able to deliver. All that these things are very good to practice, but they can lead to this kind of misconduct. And for scientific ethics, this is the standard definition, and this is for National Academy of Science. Everything is cited, so you can definitely see that. And important thing is that you have a societal responsibility. This is what it says. Society trusts that the results of research reflect an honest attempt by scientists to describe the world accurately and without bias. No bias. No bias in judgment, no bias in interpretation, no bias in writing, and so on. So this is something which is the motto of, and it is a guiding principle for every scientist. This slide I just switched after the talk, that why there is this dilemma. And if you see, I will not, because this has been all said. For me, it's important to talk about these two things, that sometimes it is in subconscious mind. If you are reading a paper, you are highly inspired, you have read 2-3, you take, if you are looking at, say, photovoltaic, perovskite solar cells, lithium ion batteries, or even energy harvesting, there are so many reviews. And if you read 10, 12, and if you are doing good homework to write a wonderful abstract, it might be that there are 2 or 3 catchy sentences that you are reading again and again. So when you are sitting in front of computer typing that, it's not that you are copying it, but your mind, when your body starts dictating your mind, because you have read, your eyes have read, so you will start writing that, and that becomes a problem, that you start owning that text which doesn't belong to you. So that is a problem which is very common. It happens to most, any serious, even experienced people can go through that. That's why I always give it for double check to somebody before you submit it. Just give it to a person who is probably not an expert, and tell them that, because if people are serious, they will definitely tell you that, oh, this looks like I've read it somewhere, because a lot of people are there who are having extremely good memories. Now, I am a chemist by training, and we have American Chemical Society was, I think, one of the 4 or runners in this, that they had their codex text in place. So they said that we have responsibility while doing science towards the public. So chemical professional should act, and this can be any, you can just say scientific professional should actively be concerned with the health and safety of co-workers. So this is the, if you are doing this work with some hazardous chemicals and you are not writing the problems. I'm working with radioactive. We do a lot of work on uranium chemistry. So uranium, we are using depleted uranium, but in Germany, that's a very funny law. You cannot use depleted uranium, you are only allowed to use natural uranium. And natural uranium is far more radioactive. If I give it as a PhD topic to my student without telling them, because he or she will be afraid of doing this, I am doing a severe misconduct. So this is my first job, to inform the person properly, and then there are other ways to argue and convince and so on, but not by falsifying or hiding information. Towards the science, chemical professionals should seek to advance chemical science, understand the limitation of their knowledge, and respect the truth. That's something which is universal, and I think people are, so I think don't need to elaborate on that. Now, there are obviously some basic rules here which are obvious, and I think what I'm trying to is to prepare a stage for some discussion. These are obvious things, and many of you must be saying, we know all of these things, why should we worry about that? So professional code, government regulation, if you are working for third party, whether it's your national funding agency, you're always signing a contract, because these contracts are so big, the guidelines are so big. When you get acceptance letter that your project has been funded, there's always a guideline, a guidebook, a small. No one reads that. I'm also getting it for many years, but I think I cannot say that I have read I know there are big mistakes in them, but these are actually the guidelines we need to abide by. Institutional policies can go on any website also of the universities or institutions. They have their ethical policy. So when you are working, you are supposed to follow those ethical guidelines. Personal convictions. So I think honesty, your own integrity, commitment, core values, they are important for science and for doing science with responsibility. Now, I think it can continue that your professional code of conduct is not stopping at your responsibility towards your co-workers or your employer or society. It is towards your own profession. So the ethical codex is that first of all I have to be true to my own profession. So that's why it is expected that the scientists should strive to remain current with developments in their field. So inform yourself, share ideas and information, keep accurate and complete laboratory record. This is a new, and I think this I can say for this audience, a lot of people are not keeping a lab book, lab journal because of this, that you always want to type something and write. People have stopped working, and sometimes a lab book close to your experiment setup in lab is far more accurate than what, because certain observation, because you have observed a wonderful color change, or when light is shining the crystal were looking different. By the time you go back to your office, you met someone who's asking or stopping you for coffee, you forgot to write this observation. So you might miss something, a very interesting photochromic behavior or an electron transfer. While, because if you are heating a compound, subliming it, then you realize that during the sublimation the color was different after the cooling. It might be that you have a redox chemistry in the solid state. So all these observations are not possible, I will do it on the weekend. So that is important to record, laboratory records, and at least in Germany it's a rule, when you submit your thesis you have to submit your lab journal. There was in Germany a Nobel Prize on quantum Hall effect, and this person, Professor Klaus von Klitzing, he was Max Planck director in Stuttgart, and there was a dispute because somebody also claimed, and he has so well documented that it was an experiment done late in the night. Basically what he was seeing was that when the electrons are jumping from one energy level to another, so he did the experiment very late in the night when there is nobody in the building, so no vibrations, and he had time noted, experiment noted, everything with his own hand, and that was a very important piece of information. And this can go wrong because claims are claims. Now you can have an opinion and you can suggest it, I can. So there is a well-known debate in CNT, carbon nanotubes. This topic would have been considered for a Nobel Prize long ago, but there is a big debate between two Japanese scientists. I found it first. One coming from academia, the other from industry, both equally influential, equally visible. So the whole field is, because it's a disputed, nobody will come and say we recognize. If the Nobel Prize or any other awards committee is recognizing, they will be in trouble saying, didn't you do your homework? So I think you should also see there is a far more bigger implication, because the field, if they are getting some extra recognition, can obviously have a different growth. Then obviously towards the employees and subordinates, and towards the students, to promote professional development, learning and safety instructions. Obviously no discrimination, which is also it can happen in bigger groups, that there are smaller groups. This can be based on the topic, that you have one group only working on self-assembly, the other group is doing something else. It can be that, okay, there are people coming from the same group. I had this situation, there was a time I had a big number of people from Asia and they were all hanging together, and this created obviously some disturbance in the harmony of the group, because the purpose of joining an international group is also that you share your cultural values, your experiences, but if you are just within your own cluster, it doesn't help the atmosphere. Then towards the environment, and I think we had at lunch a lot of discussion on sustainability at the table, because that is also important. If you are doing a new material, you have to see what could be the environmental footprint. If is there any way to find a greener solution? And that's an ethical responsibility. If I develop something and I think that, oh, industry is highly interested, but this can be very toxic for the person dealing, I should also make it clear that this is good, but it has a downside. And same is in doing every experiment. If you are doing a chemical synthesis, if it can be done in 100 milliliter, why to use 1 liter of solvent? You are using more energy and all. And American Chemical Society is very particular on that. Use minimum amount of energy when it is needed, minimum amount of solvent. If you can do the, before you make a large amount and throw it, you can also do it at a small scale and then see the utility. So the economy of the chemical is very important, and that is also explaining it here, that towards the environment and also towards people who are not going to be for a long time, like interns. Sometimes you have interns coming to your lab who are not from that field and you are supervising them. But that's your responsibility, because as immediate supervisor that you inform them, and most of the time PhD students are taking this responsibility. So you are guiding somebody who is actually not a scientist, is maybe is an engineer, has never made a material, has never done a CVD or deposition or chemical synthesis. Be sure to inform about the safety aspects of lab and so on. So these are important things that you need. Now, in terms of freedom of research and boundaries, that is, and I just gave this example. Obviously, as a fundamental scientist, you have a lot of research freedom. You can do whatever you're born, basically. And but this whatever you want is not like that you start doing things which will create problem for your surroundings, your co-workers, the society, the institute, and so on. This is something which I just mentioned, that this first slide relates to this, that now there are very strict guidelines how to deal with animal testing, how to see whether the chemical you are developing, new chemical, is it green or not. There is a reason why GMOs, genetically modified organisms, are still not in Europe. So all these things, if there is a ethical doubt or this debate of you not using corn for creating biodiesel, they are having both sides, pros and cons, and you need to these to analyze, and that's why this is important to consider in while doing your research. Now, personal conviction is at the end, when things have gone wrong, it's very difficult to say whose fault was it. You always can point finger at somebody else, but you cannot come out of it without taking a part of the responsibility on your own shoulder. And rules, as it says, they are just setting minimum standards for behavior rather than striving for the ideal. So you always have to see the same rule. I give you a very good example. Here in Germany, when we came, and I said I did in India, you come, you are on somewhere on the street, 10 o'clock in the night, street is empty, there is red light for those who are crossing the road. People will stop there, right? Because red light means stop. There is nobody, no car coming or nothing. And you can, in India, we had a different. So because we think that this is just a guidance, red, it says that okay, be careful, but I don't have to stop. So I will keep going. Whether people say or not, I'm not saying that it is good. What I'm trying to say is that given this thing that in India the streets are so crowded that people think it's waste of time to stop at red light. So this is what I'm saying, is that the rules are minimum standards. If you are following or not, that's your personal conviction, and you have to. And now I think things have changed since we have cameras and all. Now in India also things have changed. Obviously in night 10 and 11 o'clock you will not have any police person standing there. So the cameras are doing the work now. When you get the ticket at your home delivered, then you are saying, oh, next time I have to be careful. So that's one thing. Rules will also not resolve some of the personal conflicts and moral dilemmas that arise in research. So it is very like journals have rules against listing undeserving authors on paper. So this I just mentioned. Undeserving means that so-called ghost authors, where you just want to express your thankfulness. Then the dilemma which is coming out is that yeah, am I obliged to do this? Because if you can say, oh, my professor asked me. And here there was a famous case in this institution, I'm not going to tell any names, where a professor, they got a high profile paper accepted, and this paper they asked to do some analysis, very trivial analysis. So the professor was traveling, he just said that I've answered this question, and the analysis part just make it up. Wrote in the manuscript. So this PhD student, probably smart enough to do the work, but not smart enough to see that. So in the edited file, this file was uploaded with the comment of the. So what happened is, now if I am asking as a supervisor my student to do wrong, I have the major problem with my ethical code. So obviously a lot of things happen after that, but and somebody noticed it was in supplementary information, and maybe the reviewer who pointed out at this thing that this should be doubly checked, this person saw the manuscript and very soon it was everywhere. So and it costed this colleague her job. So in case of doubt, please, there are always people who are there are institutional policies, there are informed people, there are people who are having this job. In Germany they are called ombudsman, and maybe it's the same word in. So you have senior people who can then, in case of, even if you think, oh, I have to submit PhD thesis with my professor and he asked me to do something wrong, I don't want to run in trouble because he may get annoyed. No, it's not. You should first confront him. Don't go backdoor and start bashing your professor or your guide, but say that this is not something which is close to or according to my personal conviction. I really want to have a word on it. Can you explain me why you are asking me to do this? And then you have it on record that you had this conversation. And I think in most of the cases nobody will say, but it might happen in one or the two cases. It can also be that somebody else has done this work before you, and you have some good start because of that previous work. So it can be also a positive thing. Then I think there is basically, as I said, that information always, if you have an ethical dilemma, there are a lot of people who can help you out. Now it is obviously becoming bigger when we change the context. I gave you this example of bird, but what about this? There was a Nobel Prize, and a lot of people who moved from, after doing great science in understanding the atomic structure, and the fusion, they moved to US, and it was required for energy production, but it was also used for other things. So now, with the hindsight, what all bad has happened, you can today put it into a different context, and Greenpeace can say, oh, this is not, even the transport of radioactive waste is not allowed. But I think this you cannot remove. This is a part of the human history now, and with new concept for medicine coming, it's also important when you are judging a paper which is on biomaterials, for example, where you see that it has a direct implication on, or animal studies have been done, look carefully. And if you don't understand, you are always allowed to seek even the journals are allowing you that if there is an aspect where you are not confident to judge, you can take advice of somebody. And you can go to a department in medical science in your university and say, this is what I've read, does it make sense, and so on. And obviously with further evolution it will become more difficult, but for your context, I think the message I want to with this is that there is no right way to do wrong thing. So you cannot, I mean, there is no way to justify it if you've done something wrong. And I think the most common or known ethical issues are involvement of children, patient, vulnerable population. I was talking about the medical science, human embryonic stem cells. Everyone knows that. For stem cell research, it has to be gene modified food, privacy and data protection. This is, I think, societal common knowledge, common sense, common knowledge. Everyone knows that. When you take pictures of everyone, you know, I don't want to be, and all these things. So, research on animals and non-human primates, these are all, I think, that's why I put in bracket known. But then you have subject specific ethic code, and European Commission, and this is part of the European project, is very strict on this. So I'm an expert for ethics in several projects. It may sound boring, but certain projects are just judged based on the ethics. That's why this is an important thing. You may not find it immediately relevant. You are not going to be confronted with everything tomorrow morning, but you will need it in your professional career. Doesn't matter whether you stay in academia or you go to industry. So this is something, that's why it is important. Then I think how it is changing, it was important, and this cartoon says it. So if you are, obviously, if there is a group of people and everyone is the same opinion, and you ask them, then they will. So if a group of scientists have decided to fabricate data, doesn't make sense to ask them, because they all will say, oh yeah, it's a small difference, doesn't make a. So I think it is very important that the neutrality of science is not affected, and yeah, I think this ethical and social aspects of the work, they are not becoming a barrier in the scientific progress. Now I just wanted to give this example of self-control, because we had I've been editor in several journals, I'm still in few, and you get typically these kind of emails. This is one example I just took after this discussion. A group of people, they ask you, oh, if you let our paper go through and we multiply with so if like the impact factor of the journal is 10, we multiply it with 1000, you get $10,000. If as an editor you allow that paper to go through. Now you can see their business model, and it's a different kind of emails. It's not even one comma from me. The scheme is simple. They will collect papers from authors who are weak in science but rich in cash, and they will collect money. The authors will pay for the publishing an article. My job as an editor is just to accept it as an editorial screening, and then send it to those reviewers who will not decline or shoot it down, this paper. And once it is published, the article is published, we share our profit with the editor of the journal. Win, win, win. All the parties are satisfied, everybody is happy. But I can tell you there is no happy ending in this story, because, and that's very clear. Now you can see my company works in markets of Russia, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, China, and Iran. Iran has a problem because of the sanction. They cannot publish in any of the ACS journal. They cannot come to also good European journal like RSC or Wiley. China, there are universities, so not every university is part of Chinese Academy of Science, or it's not Beijing, Shanghai. They also have several universities where people still have language issues. So Azerbaijan, Russia, Kazakhstan, these are the petrodollars which are converted then for science. But what I'm saying is that this is something which is, and now you can see here, and they are smart enough. They are saying, we will not provide you, so I'm not going to have a special issue of all foreign funded publications. They said, we will spread the risk. One paper per article. So if you provide from 1 to 5 articles for issue, no more than 1 article from one country, so no one notices. This will not cause any suspicion, any journal interested to publish article from me, and the profit is shared. So, and what I'm trying to, this is nowadays very, very common, people approaching you and saying, I have a well written manuscript, can you submit it from your address? So if you're working, say, a good, like a good address in France, you are in Austrian's group and you use her name, without citing her, but her lab address, and submit it. You are creating, obviously, this is a not only a breach of the code of conduct, but also a problem which will have a boomerang effect, even if she is not part of that, because you are using the institutional address and the visibility of that institution coming from, obviously there is a, I can understand, because if I go to African countries, people do say that okay, our papers are not seriously considered, because somehow even editors have this mindset that the level of science has to be moderate. So I think this is something which is where you have, I was talking the pitfalls. Now ethical issues, this was in 1999 the first UNESCO conference on ethics in science, and I think ethics in science is not very old, because after, and I'm telling you, there are more papers published in duplicate before 1980. Lot of Russian work, extremely good work done by Russian scientists was reproduced, because no one, they were always publishing in Russian. Not a lot of people didn't have access. But this was not something which, and people were also having very limited number of conferences. But after, now you have access to the web, everything has become transparent. I don't think that any editor before, when we used to send handwritten copies of manuscript, had the capability of doing this check on what has been copied from other. If you go to RSC, Graham House, there are people still sitting with this small cards where they follow the status of the manuscript, how far it is, and then this one box is, that's the reason that they still have issues in article. Why do we need, when we are publishing online, why it has to be an issue? You can just publish one whole, but this is the history. So what I'm trying to say, that ethical issues are not new, but for your generation. So I was never taught any, so my role model were my mentors. So whatever they did, I thought it has to be like this. I don't want to judge them now, but this is how ethics were taught in my PhD, which is obviously 30 years back. But so now you are more concerned, the environmental concern, how to treat third-party funding, the responsibility to a taxpayer's money. Somebody was saying that the knowledge being produced by people's money, why should I pay again to access it? All these things are becoming more and more relevant. So it's important that you are aware of that. So as I said, that government have set up, in every place there is a ethics committee, there are debates on this, how to deal with the data and so on. And with big data coming, publication is also, I mean, we saw the good side of that, we have editors who are dedicated, but actually it's also market. Your knowledge is somebody's product. So companies coming and having a consortium contract, they are not providing their data provider, but they used to be, maybe they can say, knowledge management company. So I think all this is in a flux, this situation where we are going to end. In Germany, everybody is trying to have an open access, all journals, everything, so that worldwide people can access. So I can access it, but I don't have to cite it. So I can read your paper, take the ideas I need, but I don't need to cite it if I'm unfair. So what will happen is, this will create an imbalance, that countries having larger population of scientists will obviously determine which country is on the top in the worldwide citation. So I think a lot of things will emerge or settle down, depending upon how you look at, in the next few years. Now, I think the publication ethics is very well addressed. I will not go much into detail, but I always, this is something that we, at least in our group, practice. By the way, this paper by Whiteside is also hanging in our group kitchen, because that's something, how to write a paper. And there is another one by Yunan Shah, who was George's student, who has written a very nice article. It was on, I think, in George, also in Advanced Materials, I think. So how to write a paper, and how you do, how you make a story, how to build that. Now, in terms of publication ethics, I think the first thing is, to give credit, and I think this Newton already did this, that he said that I'm with my, if I can see further, I'm standing on the shoulder joint. So I think this is something, and I think if you look at this cartoon, this is very ethics on the edge. This says that this secretary is asking, I see you are the co-author of this paper, Dr. Moritz, and you came up with some new insights in the field of quantum mechanics, which you will explain further next week. Now you have three answers. Yes, I am. So I'm just co-author, no idea of the field. I did, or I will. And they all have different degrees of involvement. So if I say I will, that means that I really did this and I will further explain it. But the first answer shows that your involvement is very limited. So that's why this, when you write a publication, I think this was mentioned, soundness and reliability, your own honesty when you are writing the paper, the story you want to sell, the balance between originality, transparency, appropriate authorship and acknowledgement, fair collaborations, accountability and responsibility, adherence to peer review and publication conventions, and responsible reporting of research involving human or animals. These are the guiding steps that you should keep in mind when you try to present something that will be there forever. That's the only plus point of doing science, that with every paper that you publish, you have an immortal signature of yours in the scientific world. Now, and I think that's why I like this your involvement, the discussions we had today. This shows that you are really very involved, and I'm very thankful to Osreen and Paul and Graciela for putting this program where we are. It's our job to. I can't say that, oh, no one taught me, so why should I talk to you? But I have learned through some experience, and that's why this positive sensitization, that you are at least informed, is important from the beginning. And that's why ethics is knowing the difference between what you have a right to do and what is right to do. I think this is something which is very, very important. So yeah, Paul, I just thanked you for arranging this, because I think it's good to have this discussion on several aspects of I will say you are all scientists in making. So, and we have an escalation in cases of misconduct. So we need to refocus it as a topic in our classroom teaching. Ethics is not a subject, and I discussed with, but if I offer a class for science ethics, students who otherwise will always attend my class, they will say, oh, is it relevant for exams? First thing. Second thing, but this is something I can also just read in, or you can send me the slides. So I said, yes, you can read, but I was thinking of having a discussion. I said, ethics discussion, I think my parents did enough with me, so I'm done. So maybe it's time to also rename the course, because if you in the same class, if you say, oh, we are going to have a course on soft skills, how to make PowerPoint slides, everybody will come. So I think we don't want to create PowerPoint engineers, but we really want to have scientists with a lot of sense for ethics, ethical guidelines, ethical codex, and especially this sense of respecting the purpose of doing science. So that's why it is very important to somehow, and I think through this project we will also give some recommendation to the commission, that it should have a positive focus on fundamental. It should become a part of fundamental science, why we do this, or why someone has to become a scientist by profession, and where are the grounding principle or rules of the road. Then learn from historical successes as well as historical mistakes. We had some example. There are lots of historical mistakes also where people have published, because one paper was so high profile, they published a lot, and then they had to, somebody looked at, and interestingly, that people not always learn from the mistakes of the past. Many of the high profile misconduct stories were noticed by analyzing the data, experimental data that you publish, where people were copying the noise. Because if I want to fabricate the data, I will just copy everything in the origin and plot it. But what people don't understand, that noise in any spectra or any data is a fingerprint. That means noise can never be the same, and if it is same, that means something is wrong. And there are several cases, and there is no way to. So even if you there is no way to go around it. This is, and I had last week, and that's why I will just. There is a paper from two colleagues, fortunately, unfortunately, from India. They nowadays you can put a preprint on the, and you can have a fantastic idea. What they published is, and you can read this. This is Nature. There's a Nature commentary, and it is a paper saying that they have found superconductivity at room temperature. It's a super simple paper: silver nanoparticles in gold matrix. Silver gold nanocomposite. Obviously, and we have in University of Cologne has a big focus on superconductivity since it's traditionally 50 years old. And one of my colleagues who is leading a big project on quantum matter, he was at the Harvard University, and at the Harvard they were discussing, do you know anyone who can verify? So the first information came to me, he said, does it make sense? So, right. So what happened is, and how fast is, and this is the most strong argument to do science. Science has a self-correction mechanism, and it worked again in this case. So I analyzed over the weekend. I said that there are a lot of things. They did not publish any detail on how they made the sample, and there is a wonderful video showing, and this would have been the sensation of the last 100 years. Forget about any other invention, because you know how many people have it's just, and you see this wonderful palette levitating. You can look at room temperature superconductivity in silver copper nanoparticle or alloy. You will find a bunch of reports, and now the people have analyzed more and more, and my group has looked. There were problems. They said that, okay, first of all, silver and gold, they mix very well, and they are saying that our silver particles are isolated in gold matrix, and we have made this sample by a special chemical sintering. So those who are expert in sintering, they will ask, what is this chemical sintering? And they have used some solvents which they say that this is the, like chloroform and methanol. These solvents are so neutral towards gold and silver, nothing, they can't change the surface chemically. So there are a lot of problems. And then in the EDX data that they published, there is only gold, there is no silver to see in and there are lots of, and the sample has porosity and also now. And I wrote to this friend Akim, I said, and he immediately discussed, because of the time difference, because I was writing in night, so he said, you are absolutely right, this is what we have been discussing for one day. It looks, there is a big doubt about the data. So in Nature, and they said that we have, Nature obviously commented, said, okay, we are not publishing or not considering this paper further unless every detail. It's still going on. It's not, I'm not saying that this group is wrong. They're still sticking to, but they have to now, the whole scientific community is saying, publish the details of the sample. This is the simple thing, that if you, like people who are discovering new elements, new isotopes, and I'm in this committee IUPAC for many years. So when you have a new element, you can claim everything is fine, but this claim will now be given to some other labs. They will repeat it and they will confirm it. So same is here, that if somebody is claiming that we have now 70K superconductivity, 70 degrees, so you should have the possibility of repeating it somewhere else. So that's why I'm saying not everybody is learning from historical mistake. Then I think we should write also case studies or say with positive outcomes. We should, because ethic always has a negative. When you talk about ethic, or people say something is wrong, why we are talking about ethical guidelines. And I can tell you, in Germany there was a series of politicians, high profile politicians, who had fake PhDs. Somebody else has written, but it was never realized, because it was same like the generation was never told what is right and what is wrong. It was very common to give somebody $20,000 and he or she will write something on how the migration in Africa of a particular plant has taken. Nobody is interested in these, but at the end you have a doctor title. It may help you in your political career, but it is ruining the ethics of science. So I think it has now taken a big dimension. People are very, very careful, but it costed several high profile politicians their career. Central minister, they had to resign just for this reason. And one of the most two, and one was interestingly, and I think this is a small audience, was the education minister Anita Shavan, and we had organized a big Indo-German symposium where she was supposed to come, and she did not come in Delhi, and everybody is asking why she didn't come, because that day it was confirmed and she cancelled in the last because she had to resign. Now I have two options: to tell that why the minister didn't come, or just to say something else happened, because they will read anyway next day. So I think, and we need to provide students with a toolbox for ethical decision making. I think I'm coming to the end. I think the important point is there is a German recommendation, but it says that scientific misconduct, when it does it occur? It occurs when in a scientific context deliberately or grossly negligent misrepresentations are made, intellectual property of others is violated, or the research activities are otherwise impaired. So this is something which is very clear to everyone. The motivation is either ease of fabrication or career pressure. I think I mentioned earlier also, there are no good ways to be ethically wrong. So whether you are inventing data, where you are corrupting data by changing here and there things, by selecting and rejecting unwanted results without disclosing them, through manipulation of representation or illustration. This also you can do. We saw that picture of nanorods in the field alignment, where people can say it's very poor photoshopped. Photoshopping is also a skill, but don't use it. So I'm not saying people will start working on their Photoshop skills. Incorrect information in a letter of application or a grant application. That's also, we talked only about publication, but even if you are, a lot of people say, who is reading? My H index is 12, but I can say it's 18. Nobody's going. This is a KO, because this will spread very fast. And if like paper submitted, oh, I think I need 9 papers, because otherwise I have 7, and if I say under revision, or people really take notice of that. So make sure that any information you provide is, and somebody asks what is a perfect CV? Perfect CV is which has exactly the information that belongs to you. Not that you have a perfect looking photograph, we should also have. Then scientific misconduct is infringement of intellectual property. And I have worked with in an institution where we were working with a lot of industry. Nowadays, industries are not willing to patent. They keep any innovation as an in-house secret. And the reason is because if you have patent in something new, there will be dozens of companies coming around coming forward to go around that patent and take that technology. So once again, this is a big problem. And if you are working in a European project, you have a consortium agreement, you have companies where you go for secondment to industry, you have to be careful that you don't bring information out or spread it without their knowledge. This is especially true if you are working on any side project where you are involved with industry. Unauthorized exploitation under presumption of authorship. This we discuss. I think Marco has wonderfully, I think has more information where things can go wrong. And once again, things can go wrong, but things are then easily caught. That's what he showed, that an editor can do it with few mouse clicks. You may sit for 3 days or weeks, but then the editor will see it in all possible colors that it is not correct, the manuscript. Exploitation of research approaches and idea in particular is upraised. The theft of idea. Even, oh, I just took the introduction. No, that's also theft of idea. How to produce the story, so I think that's important. Don't take anything which even if just for making an appetite, or cite properly. The presumption of or unfounded acceptance of scientific authorship or co-authorship. That's the bigger problem. I think I elaborated that. On purpose corruption of the content. oh, I'm saying my sample is monodispersed, but there are some clusters, bigger particles. Maybe I can just take out selectively one TM showing the best, and that this is a corruption of the data. Unauthorized publication and authorized disclosure to third party, as long as the work, knowledge, hypothesis, teaching, or research approach has not been published, is also um, misconduct. Yeah. Another point is utilization of co-authorship of another without his consent. This we discussed that. Some Arun asked that. You cannot put somebody else's name and say, okay, let this person be so that I have a higher chance of getting paper accepted. Then sabotaging research activities, manipulating experimental setup. All these things are happening, that people, equipment, documentation, hardware, and these should be also carefully analyzed before submitting. Elimination of primary data insofar as it violates legal or discipline principle of scientific work. This is also a misconduct. I think this is the final on this misconduct. On the question of a possible co-responsibility of indirectly involved parties. Yeah, so if you say, I didn't do it on purpose, my boss asked me to do it. But this will not save you or your career, because a co-responsibility for misconduct may arise, and it will obviously affect you. It will affect the boss, obviously. So active participation in the misconduct of others, knowing about even the knowledge is also, if you know something bad has happened. Co-authorship of counterfeit publications. Somebody is saying, oh, just do my this, you are the SEM operator in this group, just do the sample and you will see in few months you will have a paper. You don't even have to do anything else. Make sure that you don't agree unless you have seen the manuscript, and give it to your supervisor. That's the proper ethical code. Say that this paper has nothing to do with you, but I have used the services of this institute, your trust, I just want to give it to you for your information. If he or she gives okay, then you can move on, but don't get into this trap, I'm getting a publication for free. Gross neglect of the duty of supervision, allowing ghost authors. I think this I elaborated. Now, there is no real guide, but you can go all the way from once you have identified the conflict to the consequences and make others informed. I think science is difficult to do. It's like this snake and ladder kind of thing. If you are lucky, smart, careful, and ethically correct, you may find several ladders. But with a dragon head, you will not come too far. I'm telling you, most of the examples, or almost all the examples, have shown that you always have a problem, and this backfires during your active career. And I'm telling you, scientists, they just work and they live for their own scientific repute. You want that your work should be read, it should be replicated, it should be cited, so you are, that's a personal interest. So you can hurt your self-esteem in such a way which you can never repair. So that's why there are a lot of things, and I think this is important. Publications are not like makeup, there is no way back. So once you publish something, even if you are a blacklisted author, it's there. So the paper which was blacklisted here, you can still find it. That wrong alignment for paper of nanorod, that is there. It's a standard thing when you show the misconduct. There are several other papers similar. But so it is an irreversible consequence, very, very important. Scientific roles, I think this I will skip because this is what you have to do as when you are reviewing. Responsibilities, and I think I like this. To write is human, and this is a compliment to Mark. To edit is divine. Please be kind to enhance papers when they come next time to you. Look for enhance. Yeah, I think reviewing a manuscript, what he was saying, that it's difficult to find reviewers. It's true. If you can't review, there is a way to just say, there are not too many papers coming to you, but you can always say, I am occupied. You can decline instead of keeping the authors waiting. And just because you may find someday time to look at the PDF and see if it is interesting for you, don't do that. But I think I will stop this. I think this all was actually how to write a manuscript. I think this is in the interest of time. The open access you will cover. I think I don't need to. Open access issue, I think predatory publishing was for me very important because I'm seeing this more and more. My final message is a small mistake goes a long way. So be your own guide, be careful, ask questions, get involved, and don't be misled. Otherwise, it's a great thing to do science, and this is a privilege. That's why it's a passion and profession in one package. So I think with this, I leave the stage for, if there are any questions, I would be happy to discuss, but I think Ratsila has this, her presentation. Thank you very much.